Deep in the Thar Desert, where summer temperatures hit 50 degrees Celsius and the ground cracks like old pottery, India built something with no equal anywhere on Earth. Not a military base, not a city, a solar park. 2,245 megawatts of installed capacity, spread across 14,000 acres of land that was, until recently, considered almost worthless. It became fully operational in March 2020, and it has barely registered in Western media since. That is the story of Bhadla. But the engineering record is almost the least interesting part. The real question is not how India built the world's largest solar park. It is why India built it here, in one of the most hostile environments on the planet, and what that decision says about where India is actually going. To understand that, you have to understand what the Thar Desert is. Most people outside India picture Rajasthan as a place of forts and palaces, of Jaipur's pink sandstone and Jodhpur's blue houses. The Thar is something else. Roughly 200,000 square kilometers of arid scrubland and shifting sand. One of the hottest places in Asia during summer. The Jodhpur district, where Bhadla sits, regularly records some of the highest ambient temperatures in the country. The land is flat, exposed, and brutal. For most of India's post-independence history, that description made the Thar a problem. Low agricultural value, sparse water, the kind of terrain that development plans quietly skip over. Then someone did the math on solar irradiance. The same conditions that made Bhadla inhospitable for almost everything else made it nearly perfect for solar generation. Clear sky for most of the year, almost no cloud cover during peak generation hours, flat land that simplifies panel installation at scale, and an enormous amount of it, with very few competing land uses to negotiate around. The desert was not a liability. It was an asset that had been misclassified for decades. The Rajasthan government recognized this in the early 2010s, when India's solar ambitions were still mostly aspirational. The National Solar Mission, launched in 2010, had set a target most analysts considered optimistic: 20,000 megawatts of solar capacity by 2022. The government needed land. Rajasthan had it. Bhadla was identified as a development zone and construction began. What followed was not a single project. Bhadla is actually a collection of multiple solar developments built by different companies across 4 separate zones, all connected to the same grid infrastructure. The developers include some of India's largest energy companies alongside international investors who recognized early that the economics of utility-scale solar in Rajasthan were unlike almost anywhere else. Low land cost, high irradiance, long-term power purchase agreements that made the numbers work. By the time the full 2,245 megawatts came online in March 2020, Bhadla had surpassed the previous record holder, India's own Bhadla Solar Park in Karnataka, which had itself recently taken the title from a facility in China. Here is a number to anchor that. 2,245 megawatts is roughly the output of 2 large coal plants running simultaneously, enough to supply electricity to approximately 1 million Indian households. A single installation on land that was generating almost no economic value 5 years earlier now feeds power into a grid serving 1.4 billion people. But here is where the story gets more interesting than the headline number suggests. India's energy situation is not like Europe's or America's. The West's energy transition debate is largely about replacing infrastructure that already works. India's situation is different. India still has hundreds of millions of people without reliable electricity. Not intermittent electricity, not expensive electricity, no electricity or power that cuts out for hours a day. The energy transition in India is not a replacement story. It is an expansion story. India needs to add capacity at a scale with no real modern precedent, without locking in 50 years of carbon infrastructure. Bhadla is one answer to that problem. The geopolitical layer matters here too, and it tends to get skipped entirely. India imports roughly 85% of its oil, along with significant quantities of coal and natural gas. Every rupee spent on energy imports flows out of the Indian economy and into someone else's, often to countries with their own geopolitical agendas. Energy dependence is one of the oldest levers of external pressure on a developing economy. You can see it in how Russia used gas pipelines to discipline European foreign policy for 2 decades. Every megawatt of domestic solar capacity is a megawatt India no longer needs to buy from someone else. Bhadla's 2,245 megawatts represent a geopolitical hedge as much as an energy project. China understood this logic first and moved faster. China now manufactures roughly 80% of the world's solar panels and has positioned itself as the dominant supplier in the global clean energy supply chain. That creates its own dependency risk for countries relying on Chinese panels, and India is not blind to it. There is an active effort to build domestic panel manufacturing capacity, partly for cost reasons, and partly because importing 100% of your solar hardware from a country you have an active border dispute with is its own kind of strategic exposure. This is the layer of the Bhadla story that almost no Western outlet has bothered to explain. Now it is worth being honest about the limitations. Bhadla produces power during daylight hours, and storage at this scale remains a work in progress. India's grid infrastructure in some regions cannot yet absorb large renewable inputs without stability problems. The transmission lines connecting Bhadla to major demand centers are long, and long-distance transmission comes with losses. The park has also faced criticism over land acquisition processes, water use for panel cleaning in a desert environment, and how much local communities have actually benefited economically. These are real constraints. The full picture is that Bhadla is a genuine engineering achievement operating inside a system still catching up to its own ambitions. The operational complexity is worth a moment. Dust accumulation on panels in a desert is not trivial. A thin layer of sand reduces output by a measurable percentage within days. Multiply that across millions of panels, and the efficiency losses become significant. The solution involves regular cleaning cycles, and in a location with almost no water. That means either dry cleaning robotic systems or careful water logistics. Neither is cheap. Then there is the heat itself. Solar panels are less efficient at very high temperatures. The same desert conditions that provide exceptional irradiance push panel temperatures above their optimal operating range during peak summer hours. The sunniest hours are also the hours of lowest panel efficiency per unit of light received. Engineers had to balance maximum annual output against the thermal realities of one of India's hottest environments. The fact that Bhadla has been running continuously since 2020 is, in itself, evidence of India's growing technical capacity in large-scale renewable operations. The financial architecture tells you something about how India funds infrastructure at this scale. Bhadla was not built with a single government check. It was assembled through state land allocation, competitive bidding, that brought in private developers, and 25-year power purchase agreements that gave those developers guaranteed revenue. International capital, including development finance institutions and sovereign wealth investors, attracted by stable contracted returns, flowed in. When one developer ran into financing problems, the others kept building. The multi-zone structure was a resilience feature as much as a planning choice. India's target now stands at 500 gigawatts of renewable capacity by 2030. Bhadla, The world's largest solar park represents less than 0.5% of that number, which tells you something about the scale of what India has committed to. It is not a plan for one Bhadla. It is a plan for hundreds of them, spread across Rajasthan, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, and every other state with the land and irradiance to support utility-scale solar. The cost curve collapse is the single most underreported fact in this story. In 2010, solar power in India cost roughly 17 rupees per unit. By the time Bhadla came online in 2020, bids for new solar capacity in Rajasthan were coming in below 2.5 rupees per unit. That is not a marginal improvement. That is a transformation of the entire economic logic of the energy sector. Coal, which had always been justified partly on cost grounds, was no longer automatically cheaper than the sun. And unlike coal, the sun does not require mining, transport, or import negotiations. This is the context that makes Bhadla more than a record. It is a marker of an inflection point, the moment when solar stopped being the idealistic option and became the economically rational one. India did not build the world's largest solar park to win a record. It built it because, in the Thar Desert, in the late 2000s, it was the most logical thing to do with that land, that sunlight, and that cost curve. Countries still building out their energy infrastructure across Africa, Southeast Asia, and South Asia are watching what India is doing at Bhadla. Not because India is a prescriptive model, but because India is running the experiment at a scale large enough to generate real data. If a low-income, high-population democracy can transition its energy system toward renewables without sacrificing economic growth, the argument for every other developing country to follow becomes significantly stronger. One more thing worth naming: Bhadla sits in Jodhpur district, a part of Rajasthan that has historically seen limited industrial investment. The jobs created during construction, the ongoing maintenance workforce, the economic activity around a facility this size, these are not transformative in the way a new city would be. But they are real, and they are in a place that was not generating them before. Whether the land acquisition was handled fairly, whether the water used for panel cleaning is sustainable in a region already facing groundwater stress. These questions deserve honest scrutiny. India's infrastructure record includes genuine achievements and genuine failures, often in the same project. But the scrutiny should happen against the right baseline. The alternative to Bhadla was not a thriving agricultural economy. It was 14,000 acres of cracked desert generating nothing. That does not resolve every criticism. It is necessary context for any honest accounting of what was built and why. The Thar Desert is not finished. Rajasthan's solar potential is estimated at over 140 gigawatts, and Bhadla represents a fraction of that. New zones are being developed. New capacity is being bid out. Most people, including most Western analysts, who spend their careers thinking about the global energy transition, have a vague awareness that India is doing something large with solar, without any concrete picture of what that actually means. Bhadla is the concrete picture. 14,000 acres, 2,245 megawatts, a desert that was a liability until someone recalculated what it was actually worth. The world's largest solar park has been in India since 2020. The rest of the world is still working out what that means for the next 50 years.